When I first started to translate the Alliterative Morte Arthure, or King Arthur's Death, I was troubled immediately by how to illustrate it. The text, the only example of which survives in the Lincoln manuscript of Robert Thornton, is a fast-moving, fast-paced, graphic account of King Arthur's response to the Roman Emperor's decision to demand that Arthur pays him service. The outcome of which is that Arthur ventures abroad, defeats the Roman Emperor, and then lets his own pride and vanity take over to the extent that he decides to march on Rome and almost become the emperor himself. Then, of course, as we know, Mordred, who is left in Britain, decides to take over the kingdom, so Arthur has to come back, where he faces eventually Mordred, and while Mordred is slain, Arthur too is mortally wounded and clearly dies. What's fascinating about the Morte Arthure, this alliterative one, is this alliterative version, is its power, its rapidity, its incredible alliterative momentum. I think it's unlike any other poem of the alliterative revival. And so when I came to illustrate it, as usual I illustrate using Linocut prints, I was troubled about how to approach this task. What is the main emotion that's coming through? And it was a chance visit to, in fact, an exhibition in Swansea. And I came across the work of Käthe Kollwitz, a German artist and printmaker. And her work is incredibly graphic, deals with very, very dark themes. And the moment I saw her work, I thought this has to be the sort of inspiration for illustrating the Alliterative Morte Arthure. She really showed me how to get into the horror of war, and in a way, what the Morte is all about in this version is the horror of war, the terror of war, and with the alliterative words which accompany it, it has a tremendous graphic form which you just don't see anywhere else. And I think we first come across this, and perhaps is when King Arthur first ventures over to France and to avenge the claim by the Roman Emperor, and he is made aware of this monstrous giant that inhabits the top of Mont Saint-Michel, and he's up there, and this giant is actually in search of Arthur. He wants to add him to his belt of scalps of the famous that he has slain. And he's a gruesome character. He eats children, he rapes, he's a monster. He's representative of all that is hideous in humanity, but portrayed as a giant. And this is the full-size image that I produced in Linocut, about a foot square. You can see a boy peeping behind the horrific character of the giant, the teeth, the boils on his forehead. He's wielding a great big club in his hand, and that appears in the book itself here. And I'll read you some of the text which accompanies this image to give you a sense of its vitality and power. So Arthur climbs Mont Saint-Michel, and he seeks the advice of a woman, a widow, who's on the hillside there. And let's take up the narrative at line 1041. That's Arthur, he then set out swiftly to the source of that smoke, signed himself with the cross, with some words for safety, and passed unseen by that savage, till he reached the site. How unseemly he sat, that sot, supping alone. He lay languid and long, lodging most foul, the thigh of a man's limb he lifts up by the haunch. His back and his buttocks and his broad loins he bakes by that bonfire, seemingly without breeches. There were roasts full rude and rueful turned flesh, of boys and beasts both braised on a spit, and a cauldron crammed full with christened children, some braised like brisket, spun on spits by maidens. Then this comely king, on account of his people, his troubled heart bleeds where he stands on the boulders. Then he shouldered his shield, shirking no longer, brandishes his broadsword by its bright hilt, rushes on that ruffian right with a raged will, and hails highly that hulk with these haughty words. Now, all-wielding God, who all of us worship, give you sorrow, sir, and distress where you lie, for you are the filthiest fellow that ever was formed. How foully you feed! May the fiend have your soul. Here is cookery unclean. Cur, I do swear, you crud of all creatures, you cursed wretch, because you have killed all these christened children, making martyrs of them by murderous ways that are here burned and basted, broken by your hands. I shall mete out such payment as you have such earned, through the might of St. Michael, to whom this mount belongs. And for this fair lady who you left to die and forced on the field for your own filthy ends, get you ready, dog's son, let the devil have your soul, for you shall die this day by dint of my hand. It's so powerful, isn't it? The alliterative meter. On and on it goes. It spits its venom towards the wicked and the foul. And, he eventually, Arthur slays the giant. Okay, so let's move on a little further now. This passage is one really about what's striking about the Alliterative Morte is that it's not set in England, it's set in Britain. And there's elements of the text which come through which suggest a contemporaneous element of the 100 Years' War. And we in this passage we learn of the bowmen of Britain. And of course, from the they would include typically in the 100 Years' War, you'd have Welsh bowmen, English bowmen, of course, and even Scottish bowmen accompanied some of the English armies into France. So this notion of the bowmen of Britain is sort of it's almost emblematic of the island, really. And here is the image I produced of a knight charging through an arrow storm on his way to battle against the bowmen of Britain, if you like. Again, I really like with Käthe Kollwitz this sense of argument of black in the work, large black areas that create this sense of darkness and power, vitality but danger, and also depravity and melancholy of war. Why do we fight? Why do we kill? What is this all about? So let's read a little passage here. There is the image in the book. Thereafter, most boldly, the bowmen of Britain battled with brigands from afar in those lands. With fleet flying arrows, they shot fresh at those fellows. Those feather-flecked shafts pierced through the fine mail. Such warfare is foul that so hurts the flesh of the flanks of great steeds when fought from afar. Then Germans dealt darts in due response with dreadful dings of death like daggers through shields. With quaint cunning their quarrels cut through our knights with iron more quickly than one eye could wink. Thus they shrunk from the shock of all those sharp arrows, so that their schiltrons shunted and shuddered as one. Even great steeds rear up, and their riders crash down, so that 100 high men now lie on the heath. Then the highest on high, heathens and others, hurtle over that host to work them harm. And all these jumping giants engendered by fiends join battle with Sir Jonathal and his gentle knights. With clubs of clean steel they clanged at helmets, crashed at many crest, and crushed brains of men, killed many coursers and armour-clad steeds, chopped through chevaliers on chalk-white chargers. Neither steel nor steed could stand against them. They astonish and strike down all who stood in their way. Then the conqueror came, that's King Arthur, with his keenest knights, and with his cruel countenance he cried full loud, I never thought that no Briton would be so much abashed as by these bare-legged boys that are bound on this field. That's a really striking passage. What really impresses me is, in those opening lines at least, this sense of the impact of arrows in combat. There's a wonderful line there. They all shunk from the shock of all those sharp arrows, so that their schiltrons shunted and shuddered as one. We might imagine here at the Battle of Agincourt, for example, the masses of French knights advancing on foot in the mud and getting condensed ever closer, and then arrows pounding onto them so that they shudder away in shock, exactly as it's described in the text. It's incredible vitality, this, and a real sense that you get the feeling that if the scribe himself wasn't at such battles, nonetheless he must have spoken to people who were, and you really get this sense of intimate knowledge of warfare, which comes through this text time and time again. It's an amazing poem, really, and I think it's unlike any other in the alliterative canon. Anyway, let's move on just a little bit more. In the next passage, Arthur has reached Rome, he's defeated the Roman Emperor, and then he gets news that England is being attacked by Mordred, and his crown is being threatened by Mordred, so he goes back. And off the shores of the south coast of England, Sir Gawain lands first with a small group of men, and unfortunately he meets his death. And the description of this is incredibly moving, and I created this image showing Arthur clutching the dead Gawain and lamenting his loss. A really powerful scene, and let me read this to you now. So the king learns that Gawain's landed. This is after actually Gawain has been slain, and he's looking for him amongst the corpses of those that he finds. And in the process of his own death, Gawain slaughtered, in the true manner of these heroes, slaughters many more than so his own death, it was probably hundreds died trying to slay him, as befits such a hero, of course. Let us read. But when our wise king learns that Gawain had landed, he writhes with great woe and wrings his hands, and calls for boats to be launched upon the low water, then lands like a lion with his lordly knights, wades with water slopping aslant at the girdle, swaggers up swiftly with his sword drawn, assembles his battles, displays his banners, bustles over the broad sands with bitter rage, and forges fierce to those fields where the dead all lie fallen. Of the men of that traitor, on their steeds with their trappings, a truthful account says some 10,000 lay silent. And on our side for certain, some 70 knights are found surely as lifeless with their sovereign lord. The king turns over courteously each knightly corpse. Earls of Africa and Austrian nobles, those from Argyll and Orkney, kings of the Irish, the noblest of Norway in a great many numbers, dukes of Denmark also, and their dubbed knights, and the king of Gothland, he in the gay arms, lies on the ground groaning and gored right through. Our rich king keeps searching, most rueful in heart, to recover all the lost ranks of the Round Table. Then he sees them in a cluster, assembled together, with slaughtered Saracens strewn all about them, and gracious Sir Gawain in his gay arms, gripping the grass, flat sprawled on the ground. His banner brought down, with its background of jewels, his blade and his broad shield all smeared with blood. Never was our seemly king so sorrowed in heart, nor so stunned into sadness as he was by that sight. Here's the image, the book. Thus gaunt and aghast, the good king looks on him, and with grievous groans weeps great tears of anguish. He kneels down next to the corpse, caressing it closely, casts up his visor and quickly kisses him, looks on his eyelids that were locked fully shut. His lips were like lead, and his looks were all faded. Then that crowned king cries out in a bellow, "Dear kith and kinsmen, I am cleft to the heart, for my renown is now worthless, and my war has ended. Here is my hope and my health and my happiness in arms. My heart and my hardness all resided in him. My counsel, my comfort, he who kept my heart beating. Acclaimed king of all knights that lived under Christ, you were worthy to be king, though I bear the crown. My wealth and renown of this whole wondrous world was won through Sir Gawain, and through his wit alone. Alas, said King Arthur, I am crushed by sorrow. I am utterly undone, and in all my own lands. O dreadful dire death, why do you delay? Why draw out my distress? You drown my heart. Swinging in grief, the sweet king then swoons, sways, and then swiftly kisses him sweetly, until this bold noble had bloodied his beard as if he had been eating fresh butchered beasts. Had not Sir Uwaine come, and numerous great lords, his bold heart would have burst for that blow there and then. Incredible lamenting scene there for the death of Gawain. He says he should be king, though he himself bears the crown. Such loss, and this is, the sort of the sense of a different Gawain to that we read of in Gawain and the Green Knight. This is a mature, martial character, a deeply, deeply loyal servant to Arthur, of course, as he is in many of the alliterative poems, often doing things that go far beyond the bounds of loyalty for most men. But what an incredibly moving scene. Which brings us to the last scene I want to talk about, which is sort of the end of the Alliterative Morte Arthure, the death of Arthur himself. And I created this image, which is in essence Arthur breathing his last breath as his eyes slowly close and all his story empties out into the atmosphere to be told for all eternity as legend. What I'm going to do here, this is after Arthur has been mortally wounded, and he then goes looking at those he has lost at this great battle. It's incredibly moving scene, more powerful perhaps even than the scene I've just read about Gawain. So let's join Arthur as he looks at all his lost, loyal kinsmen. But then Sir Arthur finds later the bodies of Sir Uwaine and Eric the most admirable and other great lords. He lifts the corpses of Sir Cador, consumed by heartbreak, Sir Clegus, Sir Clermont, these clean men of arms, Sir Lot and Sir Lionel, Sir Lancelot and Lois, Merac and Menaduke, that ever were mighty. With languor in that field he lays them together. looked on their lifeless forms, and cries loudly in lament, as a man who loathed life and was lost to all mirth. Then, as if mad, he stumbles, and all his strength fails, lifts his eyes high aloft, and all his look changes. Then down he sways swiftly and falls in a swoon, clambers back on his knees and cries full often, "O most comely crowned king, I am left crushed by sorrow. All my lords in this land are laid low and brought under, that you gifted and granted me through your own grace. By the might of their hands was my monarchy maintained. Those who made me majestic and master on earth in these terrible times was this trouble reared by a traitor who took away all these my true lords. Here rests the rich blood of the Round Table, ripped apart for a rubcock. All is now in ruins. I am alone in this house now, helpless on this heath, like some woeful widow who wants her man back. I shall wail curses and weep and wring my hands for my wisdom and worship that have flown away. I take leave at the end of all my great lords. Here is the blood of the Britons, bled from such life, and now in the juice of this day all my joy is ended." Then all the remnants of the Round Table rally, and all of them ride to their royal ruler. Then 70 knights quickly assemble in sight of their sovereign who was left so wounded. Then that crowned king kneels and cries out loudly, "I thank you, God, for your grace and your good will, that gave us virtue and wisdom to vanquish this man and granted us to be greater than his grandiose lords. You never soiled us with shame, nor tarnished us with dishonour, but made us overlords always above all other kings. We have no leisure time left to look for other lords, for that loathsome lad has lamed me sorely. Let us go now to Glastonbury. No more I gain here. There we shall rest and remain while our wounds recover. Let dear God be lauded for this day and its deeds, who has deemed us the destiny to die in our own land." Then all wholly at once they hold on to his behest, and gallop to Glastonbury, going by the best road, enter the Isle of Avalon, where Arthur alights, and makes for a manor there, for he might go no further. A surgeon of Salerno inspects his wounds, and the king sees himself that he cannot be saved. So he soon said these words to his closest revenue: "Please call a confessor for me, who carries Christ with him. I must in haste take the housel, no matter what happens. My blood cousin Constantine shall bear my crown, and as becomes such a kinsman, if Christ wills it so. Nobles, you have my blessing to bury our lords, who by sword blade in battle were brought to their end. And then be manly and march to the children of Mordred. They must be slain surreptitiously and slung in the water, so that no more wicked weed writhes again on this earth. I warn you, work as I bid, to preserve your renown. I forgive every wrongdoing for the love of Christ in heaven. If Guinevere fares well, then long let her flower." He murmurs in Manus with his last earthly might, and thus his spirit passes, and he speaks no more. There he utters his last breath. Unusually in the Alliterative Morte, Mordred not only marries Guinevere but has children by her, and so that's the reference at the end when Arthur says, "Make sure the children are dead." He clearly still loves his wife, but Mordred, of course, is beyond contempt, and any of their offspring must be destroyed so that Arthur's successor will not be challenged. Incredibly powerful story, the Alliterative Morte Arthure. Some people read it and think they're going to read Malory and the sort of romanticised Arthurian romance. It's nothing like that. The Alliterative Morte is I think the version which survives through Robert Thornton, probably, I mean, Thornton himself was writing in Yorkshire, but he was probably copying from Lincolnshire manuscript. In this instance, the dialect is thought to represent Lincolnshire. And of course, that's where it now resides, in Lincoln Cathedral, within the Lincoln Thornton manuscript. Thornton did us a great service in copying these texts. He clearly saw that he wanted them for his own family. They were all eventually bound together in 2 volumes. But in so doing, he preserved many texts which are no longer survive in no other manuscript. So incredible service he performed, and elements of the Alliterative Morte do make their way into Malory. So he was clearly using it as a source for his own work. Wonderful. And the inspiration, as I say, for the illustrations for this came from Käthe Kollwitz, and I think as I was producing the images for the book, once I settled on Kollwitz as that inspiration, everything seemed to come together, and I think they enmeshed to tell this incredibly powerful story of how King Arthur, in his anger, turned against the Roman emperor, and then through his own arrogance believed he was more powerful than he was. And of course, as happens to all such people, he is undone by his own vanity and pride. But at least he saw it at the end, and his actions serve as an example to us all. I hope you've enjoyed this reading from King Arthur's Death, the Alliterative Morte Arthure, and seeing some of the images that I've produced for the book. The book's been out for a few years now, but it's still available in all good bookshops online, and of course direct from me at Mythical Britain. Thanks very much indeed for listening, and if any of this has disturbed you, don't have nightmares. Thank you.